Everyone assumes faster AI just means prettier dashboards.
The real win is how each engine auto-routes feedback to the right team in seconds.
So the speed alone decides the ROI.
Not quite. It's the agentic automation versus stats IQ decision logic that cuts churn and service costs.
Welcome to this deep dive. If you're an enterprise platform professional, a CRM architect, or a CX leader, we are talking directly to you today.
Yeah, exactly. Because our mission for this session is, well, it's highly specific.
Right. We're really stripping away all that vendor marketing hype to, look under the hood of AI-driven routing in both Medallia and Qualtrics.
Which is so needed right now. We want to uncover how these platforms actually work at the architectural level and what this means for closing the feedback to action loop to maximize churn reduction and, of course, your cost to serve ROI.
Because when you dig into the official documentation and, the latest 2026 field data, a really controversial truth starts to emerge.
Oh, absolutely. The measurable ROI from these experience-to-action engines, it doesn't actually come from the mathematical elegance of their predictive models. It comes almost entirely from the speed and the fidelity of their automated routing. The operational reflex of the system is the core driver of value here.
So just to clarify, we're talking about a multi-million-dollar architectural commitment, and the primary differentiator isn't the AI's ability to, understand the customer better. It's just its physical routing reflexes.
Its reflexes and its routing accuracy, yeah. The documentation proves that a highly functional model deployed in, say, 3 seconds generates exponentially more ROI than a genius-level model that takes 3 hours to route a ticket.
Wow. Okay, well, let's unpack the underlying mechanics driving that speed. Because reading through the technical briefs, these two vendors are achieving this in fundamentally different ways, right?
Right. The marketing brochures kind of blur the lines, but the architectural philosophies are miles apart.
So let's start with the Medallia engine. How is it physically operating on the back end?
So Medallia leans really heavily into real-time orchestration through their agentic automation engine. When a piece of customer feedback hits the system, the engine analyzes the sentiment, extracts the context, and surfaces a next best action recommendation in, get this, under 3 seconds.
That's crazy fast.
Yeah.
Just to ground this for you, the listener, intent extraction isn't just basic keyword spotting anymore.
No, not at all.
It's the AI understanding that a customer typing, my screen is totally spiderwebbed, actually means initiate a Tier 2 hardware replacement ticket, without a human agent having to read the slang and manually click a category from a dropdown.
Exactly. And it is doing that translation, assigning the category, and routing it to the exact hardware fulfillment team instantaneously.
Right.
It uses this feedback to service ticket auto creation feature to do all the heavy lifting. We looked at a Fortune 500 retailer case study where this specific mechanism cut ticket creation time from an average of 7 minutes down to less than 30 seconds.
Just imagine a massive call center floor where hundreds of agents are spending a third of their day just reading complaints, clicking drop-downs, forwarding emails.
Yeah, it's a huge drain.
If you cut that 7-minute manual triage down to 30 seconds, those agents are suddenly spending their time actually solving the customer's problem.
Which is the whole point.
Yeah.
And the downstream effect of that mechanism was a 3.2% reduction in average handling time across their entire retail operation.
That's huge at scale.
Right. But more importantly, when we look at their overarching action loop latency, which is the critical KPI measuring the total time from receiving feedback to actually taking action, Medallia dropped that metric from 6 hours down to 1.8 hours after their 2025 upgrade.
Wow.
Yeah, that is a 70% reduction in pure latency.
That is just a massive operational shift. But, it makes me wonder about the Qualtrics side of the equation. If Medallia is operating on this hyper-fast 3-second agentic trigger,
Yeah.
what is the Qualtrics architecture doing differently?
Well, Qualtrics takes a fundamentally batch-driven analytical approach. They rely on their Stats IQ predictive model paired with an action hub workflow.
Okay, so not real-time one-to-one.
Right. Instead of instantaneous one-to-one agentic routing, Stats IQ aggregates the incoming verbatim feedback and auto-assigns risk scores to those chunks of data.
So it's pulling data in, kind of scoring it as a group, and then releasing the routing instructions.
Exactly, yeah. It is a more deliberate, processing timeline. I mean, their action loop latency improvements are still really significant. They dropped from 8 hours to 3.2 hours after the STAS IQ V2 rollout.
Okay, so 3.2 hours.
Yeah, so it is a different rhythm than Medallia's 1.8 hours, but Qualtrics leverages a unique architectural capability that completely alters how a team plans their interventions.
Oh, you mean the synthetic panel?
Yes, the synthetic panel.
I saw this in the source material, let me guess. It basically allows you to test drive a massive outreach campaign on a simulated audience without actually sending a single real email.
That is the exact mechanism, yeah. The synthetic panel simulates what-if outreach scenarios on live historical data. So it lets CX leaders mathematically pre-validate the ROI of a proposed action before they execute it in the real world.
That's fascinating.
Right. A major financial services client used this simulation environment to test an outreach strategy for at-risk accounts. They tweaked the language and the routing logic in the simulation, deployed the winner, and reported a 4.5% increase in upsell conversion.
Okay, so the architectural divergence is really clear here. Medallia is optimizing for raw, real-time resolution speed to lower service costs, while Qualtrics is offering predictive simulation to validate and, generate revenue.
Spot on.
But let's look at what happens when these two engines go head-to-head in a live environment, because there's a massive hidden delta in the 30,000 transaction side-by-side field test we looked at.
Yeah, this was really revealing. In that specific live fire test, Medallia's real-time orchestration successfully closed 68% of flagged issues within the first service-level agreement window.
And Qualtrics.
Qualtrics batch-driven insights closed 54%.
Think about that 14-point gap for a second.
Yeah.
I mean, this is basically the difference between a real-time air traffic controller instantly rerouting planes the second a radar shows a storm cell,
Right.
versus a manager looking at a daily batch report telling them which flights were delayed yesterday. Like, both provide accurate data, but only one prevents the mid-air collision in the moment.
That's a perfect analogy, and that 14-point gap between 68 and 54% translates directly into hard operational dollars.
So I bet.
For a $250 million revenue insurer, that specific delta equates to roughly $1.8 million in annual savings.
Wow, just from speed.
Exactly. The foundation of those savings traces back to raw routing accuracy. In a 2026 survey of 820 CX leaders, 56% identified automatic routing to the correct owner as the single most critical AI capability for measurable ROI.
And how did the accuracy numbers stack up?
Medallia's routing accuracy hit 93%, while Qualtrics sat at 86%.
So if real-time routing is the air traffic controller keeping the operation running smoothly, what happens when that controller doesn't have the full picture?
That is where things get messy.
Right, because theoretical speed and high accuracy sound incredible in a vacuum, but the documentation outlines some spectacular failures when these high-speed engines collide with messy enterprise infrastructure.
Yeah, we have to separate the pristine marketing narratives from the gritty architectural reality here. There are 3 documented real-world cases where this routing mechanism completely derailed enterprise outcomes.
Let's hear them.
So, case number 1 is the context failure, driven by model drift.
Ah, right. Let's look at the airline example. They turned on the AI, it routed everything at lightning speed, but the front line didn't have the context to intervene properly.
Actually, it was worse.
Oh, really?
The system was authorized to take action entirely on its own. A global airline deployed Medallia's Agentic automation to automatically escalate flight delay complaints and resolve them quickly to prevent churn.
Makes sense on paper.
But the AI misidentified a massive weather-related delay as a standard service quality issue.
Oh, no. Because a delayed flight looks like a delayed flight to a basic text parser.
Exactly. And because the system had the authority to issue $50 compensation vouchers for service lapses, it triggered automatic payouts to thousands of passengers for a snowstorm.
Which is an act of God. They don't have to pay for that.
Exactly, not eligible for compensation.
So instead of reducing service costs, hyper-fast routing without context just automates your budget train at lightning speed.
Yeah, it inflated their cost to serve by 8% in a single quarter. The pure speed of the engine worked flawlessly, but the context and the operational guardrails failed entirely.
Which leads directly to the second failure mode, the architectural bottleneck. Let's say a company gets the context right, and they set up the guardrails perfectly. What happens when the older technology stack physically cannot keep up with the new AI's speed?
Well, this brings us to an insurer who attempted to integrate Medallia's real-time routing engine, but they connected it to their legacy CRM using batch API calls.
Oh man, So it's like putting a high-speed bullet train on 19th century wooden tracks.
That's exactly what it is.
The AI is fueled up and ready to dispatch a localized solution every 3 seconds, but the legacy API schedule dictates that the gates only open to sync data every 5 hours.
Exactly. The friction isn't in the decision-making, it's entirely in the data pipeline. The Medallia engine generated the next best actions instantly, but because the API was only syncing periodically, the action loop latency spiked right back to 5 hours during peak volume.
Defeating the whole purpose.
It completely nullified the churn prevention benefits. Your AI routing is ultimately only as fast as your slowest integration pipe.
That is a critical blind spot for IT integration teams. You cannot just purchase real-time AI. You have to plumb your entire enterprise architecture to handle continuous data flows.
That's right.
And speaking of continuous flows, the third case study is an absolute nightmare for anyone in legal or compliance. Case 3, the governance risk.
Yeah, this occurred within Qualtrics Action Hub. The automated workflow successfully parsed a block of verbatim feedback from an EU resident, tagged it for deep sentiment analysis, and shipped it to a highly specialized analytics pod to extract insights.
Let me guess. That analytics pod was sitting in a data center in the United States.
Yep. Which instantly crossed geographic data boundaries without a human compliance officer reviewing the transfer.
Oh, wow.
The automated routing inadvertently exposed personally identifiable information across borders, triggering a massive GDPR violation.
How bad was the penalty?
That single automated routing error resulted in a €1.2 million fine.
If you're a CX architect listening to this right now, that is the exact scenario that keeps you awake at 2 a.m. You deploy an automated workflow to save your team 50 hours a week, and instead, you buy your company a €1 million fine.
This specific risk is exactly why Medallia released their Action Audit Trail feature in 2025. It tracks the exact logical pathway of why a piece of feedback was routed where it went.
That makes sense.
It has rapidly become a de facto compliance requirement for regulated industries. Continuous auto-routing demands continuous data governance.
Okay, so if deploying this technology can result in €1 million fines, runaway compensation payouts, and API bottlenecks, how does an enterprise leader actually put this into production safely?
There is a very specific 4-step framework based on a RACI structure outlined in the documentation.
Right, and for anyone outside of project management, RACI just means defining exactly who is responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. It stops the finger-pointing when things break. So let's translate these 4 steps into concrete operational language.
Step 1 requires defining the action loop KPIs. You cannot manage a real-time system with legacy measures. The CX analytics lead is responsible for strictly defining the latency and closure rate targets.
So normal response time doesn't cut it.
No, traditional response time metrics are irrelevant here. It is entirely about the time it takes to close the loop. And the VP of customer experience holds ultimate accountability if those targets are missed.
Right. And step 2 is engine selection, which forces a pretty tough conversation about vendor lock-in.
It really does.
Procurement and the CFO are obviously selecting the engine, whether it's Medallia, Agentic, or Qualtrics Stats IQ. But the brief highlights a startling financial reality here, because your unique action loop logic becomes deeply encoded into these proprietary workflow engines. Switching platforms after implementation incurs a massive 30 to 40% migration cost.
Yeah, your long-term vendor negotiation leverage essentially vanishes the minute you hit deploy. You are marrying the architecture. You cannot just rip and replace these platforms like an old email survey tool.
Which is exactly why step 3 is so vital to get right. Logic configuration and guardrails. This is owned by the CX operations manager, right?
Exactly. They physically configure the routing rules.
More importantly, they are responsible for building the circuit breakers. You have to set hard escalation thresholds to prevent runaway automated actions, like the airline paying out for snowstorms. The system must know exactly when to stop and route the ticket to a human manager.
Yes. And finally, step 4, continuous model retraining. The data science lead oversees this schedule. Enterprise AI is never a set-it-and-forget-it deployment.
Oh, for sure.
The documentation provides a very clear, cautionary example of this during a recent holiday sales surge. Both platforms failed spectacularly here.
Yeah, both Medallia and Qualtrics saw a 12% drop in issue resolution speed during the peak holiday rush. The logic engine started miscategorizing severe issues as low priority.
Because the underlying sentiment language temporarily shifted. During a Black Friday surge, the phrasing of complaints fundamentally changes.
Totally. A customer typing, "Where's my tracking number?" in December isn't just making a casual inquiry. The urgency spikes, the slang shifts, the cadence of the text is entirely different.
Exactly.
The AI was trained on relaxed July data, so it treated a frantic December gift buyer like someone casually asking about summer shipping policies. It just routed them to the slow lane.
And if the underlying language model isn't rapidly retrained to understand that seasonal context, the 3-second routing engine is just making terrible decisions incredibly fast.
So assuming a team successfully navigates this framework, they define the KPIs, own the vendor lock-in, build the circuit breakers, and continuously retrain the model, what is the ripple effect across the organization?
That's the real question.
Right. If you adopt this real-time routing architecture, how does it fundamentally change your team, your financials, and your strategic roadmap?
Well, the most immediate disruption is team evolution. Faster automated routing compresses the entire decision-making chain. If the AI is instantly routing the ticket with the intent already extracted, you no longer need human agents doing the basic sorting.
So those jobs just disappear.
Organizations are eliminating those intermediate triage roles entirely, yeah. However, they aren't just letting those people go, they are upskilling those analysts into action design specialists.
Okay, so instead of manually sorting the mail and forwarding complaints, these specialists are designing the automated responses, monitoring the circuit breakers, and refining the routing logic.
Exactly. They manage the engine instead of doing the engine's manual labor.
And it makes a lot of sense.
The second major shift is financial reinvestment. The cost to serve reductions from cutting a 7-minute process down to 30 seconds are highly proven. For every $100 million of revenue, these optimized routing engines free up between $2 million and $5 million in operational capital.
That is a massive chunk of capital to unlock, which leads directly to the third implication, the roadmap shift. What do organizations actually do with that newly unlocked $5 million?
They shift their entire CX roadmap from defense to offense. They move away from reactive ticketing, which is essentially just apologizing for bad service faster, and they redirect that capital toward predictive outreach.
Using things like the synthetic panel we talked about?
Exactly. They start utilizing tools like the Qualtrics synthetic panel to proactively simulate campaigns and generate new revenue. They transition the entire department from a cost center to a profit center.
Wow. We have covered some really critical ground today, unpacking the fundamental architectural differences between agentic automation and batch-driven insights, while exposing the very real dangers of API bottlenecks and compliance failures.
It's a lot to consider.
It is. So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with 3 concrete actions you can take this week to evaluate your own architecture.
Okay, number 1, measure your exact action loop latency today. Do not look at your average response time. Look at your loop closure time. Do you actually know how many hours it takes from a customer hitting submit to your frontline team executing a resolution?
Great point. Number 2, audit your integration layers. Go to your IT architecture team and ensure that legacy batch APIs aren't artificially throttling your real-time AI engine. I mean, if you buy a 3-second routing engine, make sure your data pipeline isn't operating on a 5-hour delay.
Exactly. And number 3, review your model retraining schedule with your data science lead. Are you proactively prepared for seasonal sentiment shifts, or is your model going to drift the second customer language changes during a sales surge?
Really important questions.
And as you evaluate those 3 operational actions, I want to leave you with one deeper architectural question to reflect on.
Okay.
If your AI routing engine can make an intervention decision in exactly 3 seconds, does your frontline human team actually have the operational authority and the budget to execute that action in real time? Because the fastest routing AI in the world is entirely useless if the human at the end of the line has to spend 3 days asking a manager for permission to act.
Oh man, that is the ultimate bottleneck right there. Look, if you want to continue understanding how CRM and AI platforms actually work under the hood and hear complex platform architectures broken down without the vendor hype, you need to hit subscribe on the CRM Position podcast right now. This is the essential resource for enterprise professionals to stay ahead of real architectural shifts rather than just buying into marketing narratives. We don't read the brochures, we read the documentation. Subscribe to the CRM Position podcast, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.